So we got a little bit of a project plan for today. I've got my pinion seal is leaking. You can see here. And one of my axles needs to be replaced. So we'll walk through that. Drive shaft 12 mil 12 point to take that off. In here, pinion nut is 1 1/16. So what I do is I mark the nut and the pinion. So I'll mark it so that when I tighten it, I'm going to tighten it up just slightly past that mark, just slightly, because it's got a crush sleeve in here and you want to set it to the same preload on the bearings. So I'll mark it here, I'll mark the nut, and then when I take it off, when I put it back on, I'm going to tighten it up so it's just right, just a slightly past that mark. Okay, there we go. So I got the nut off. You can see the mark there on the pinion. And then right here on the nut, can you see that mark there? So those two are going to have to line up once I'm done. So now I'm just going to grab my 3-jaw puller and we're going to pull this flange off here. You can see the marks. So the nut right there, and then the other mark up here. So they're both lined up now, and it feels good. There's a little bit of preload on the bearings. You can feel a little bit of preload on the pinion. So we got the cover off here. I've got the drive shaft disconnected and the tires off. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to spin the diff and pull that pin out, get the pin out, and then I've got a brass punch. I'm going to knock the S-spring out, and then I'll just push in the axles, pull the C-clips out. You can kind of see a C-clip in there and both sides. I'm going to slide the axles out, and then what I do is I use the axles to pop the axle seals out. Just the end where the C-clip goes on, it's got a nice little spot. You can just pry out those axle seals with that C-clip, or with that axle. Then once I'm in here, I'm going to replace these spider gears. You can see when I had this apart before, I could see that there was some damage. You can still see there's like a little nick there on one of the gears. So I've got new spider gears to go in here. And then I'm going to re-shim my preload, get it a little bit tighter. And then I'll do my pinion seal. Okay, so I got everything pulled apart here. I'll just show you the spider gears here. You can see, so that's the spider gear I pulled out of it. You can see the damage that's done to it. It's not focusing very good, but anyways. And so I've got these used set of spider gears that are going to go in there instead. I'm going to put those in, and I'll check the side gears too and see how those are, see if I need to replace those or not. We'll see. Here's the passenger side axle. You can see the knurling here, the galling. It's coming off the surface is is no good for the bearing there. So that's the used axle I got. That one's good. Also, if you're ever storing your axles, you can just slide them in your drums, and it holds them quite securely. So then they don't get dropped or dinged up. It doesn't ding up your splines, or your bearing surface doesn't get nicked. So here's my seals ready to go in. You can see I've just taken normal axle grease, high temperature grease, and I've packed, there's a little garter spring. Here's one that hasn't been done. So you can see that spring that's in there. It holds tension on the seal. So what I like to do before I go and pound these things in is I just pack them full of grease. It holds that little spring in from popping out, because if it pops out, it will for sure leak. And I've got my drivers here, so that's going to be to drive on my axle seal. I use that, and then for the pinion seal, I'm going to use this one. So this axle here, this is the driver's side. It's in pretty decent shape, not bad at all. So I'm going to be reusing this one, and I'm just going to pop this seal out. I'll show you how I do it. I just use the axle itself, and I use the end of the axle, and I use it as a pry, kind of like a pry bar to pull it out. Here, I'll just show you. So you just slide out the axle. See if I can do this one-handed. And then with the end of the axle, you can just hook it in on the seal. So there you go. You got the seal on it, and then you just pry it out. Sorry, all the shaking, but anyways, you get the idea there. So that's it. It popped out pretty easy. Seems to be the best way, even better than a pry bar. Just that little lip on the end of the axle, it just grabs the seal perfectly enough just to pull it right out. And then I always stick my axles in my drums. Just keeps them all protected. Okay, so I'm going to put in some new seals here, both sides, and then I'm going to reassemble my rear diff. Okay, so I'm just going to stick this seal in here. Now how I do this normally is I'll take and I'll just tap it in just to get it started, and then I'll use the driver to drive it the rest of the way in. I find if I just start with the driver, sometimes it'll get cocked over to the side and then it'll go in crooked, but this way I can make sure that it's straight first, and then I'll drive it in. Another caution is just with your axles, when you're putting in your C-clips in your diff, make sure you don't shove the axle in too hard against the seal to get that C-clip in, because you will damage your seals and then it'll be leaking. So just nice and slowly, and then put lots of grease on them, and then just slide it in. After I do this and fill up the diff, what I'll do is I'll jack up one side and then the other side, and it'll help get the oil right down into the bearing here. So you want to get the oil from the diff down to the bearing. So jacking up one side, leaving it for a little bit, and then jacking up the other side, it allows the oil to travel down, and then just top up your diff after you're done.